everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video you're going to see a pretty long discussion between me and Senior Program Manager for Microsoft, Maddy Mondaquila. Now, Maddy is in a very unique situation because it was the PM for Xamarin, later turned into MAUI, and now she left the MAUI team to join the Aspire team. So I want to ask, what does that mean for MAUI? Is MAUI doomed because obviously the PM is leaving? What's the future there? As well as why did she join Aspire and what's her plan for that too? It's a very interesting discussion and I asked so many things that I'm sure you would have asked too if you had the chance. So without any further ado, just enjoy this discussion. So Maddy, welcome to the video. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. So in case people watching don't know who you are and what you do, can you please tell us?
Yeah, so I am a senior PM on the .NET team. You probably know me from Maui Land, my first child. And now I'm over working on Aspire stuff. The product lead over there, whatever that means. So
the product lead. So I remembered that, well, I think so, that Damien Edwards was sort of working on the program management of that project. Listen, it's in section. So is he still there? Are you working together? Are you firing him? How does it work?
Yeah, so Damien has been like relinquished from the annoying PM duties to go do fun stuff. And I came over to kind of wrangle everybody. And so him, David Fowler, who I watched the video that you guys did a couple weeks ago to crack me up, and I are kind of like, we're like a little triangle. And so Damien's the architect. I'm the project first. I don't know what my title even is, but and then Fowler's the guy. And then we have a bunch of very amazing engineers who are not just Fowler, like hanging out, that also work on it. But sometimes it feels like it's just Fowler.
No, he did it on his own. Just like it's just like you did. It's like single R, just like everything he does.
Yes, yeah, totally.
ASP.NET Core is 1 engineer and 5 PMs.
Correct. Yep, exactly.
So I've been, seeing you on the .NET channel for quite some time because, it was Xamarin and then it was MAUI and then now it's Aspire. And I want to go a bit back into the Xamarin days because it looks like you entered at Microsoft a few times on like a few different roles. And then in 2018, you have this, I'm working at Xamarin sort of, I think it was a PM role, right? So you were a PM for Xamarin. And after that, you had the progression of Xamarin, and then MAUI, and then Aspire. But talk to me about that, like those early Xamarin days. And obviously, Xamarin was acquired by Microsoft. Was it 2018 they acquired it? 2016. So you were not part of that acquisition because I know some people like Brandon Minnick, for example. Was it James as well? He was part of and they came over, but you joined after.
Yes. So I was an intern. So I live in the Boston area, Massachusetts, and I refused to move to Seattle. And I interned in the Boston office, and Xamarin was based in Boston. And they got acquired while I was an intern the first time. And so my boss, I remember at the time being like, "Oh my God, that's so cool. They're around here. I wonder if they'll come to the office. Like the CEO guy is crazy. Miguel, blah, blah, blah. Like they see whatever." And so when I came back the next summer to intern again, they had moved into the office fully. And they were literally in like the area. It was a fully open floor plan, the area next to the interns. And we drove them bonkers. So I remember like even Pierce Bogan, who was like notoriously the loudest person in the world, would constantly be like looking up over his cubicle, like, they're so loud. And we were like, but that's how I got to know a lot of the Xamarin people. And one of the intern projects I worked on was Ink to Code, which was like you drew something and then it spit out XAML.
Yeah. And
so I was a software engineer and I could not figure out how to sit at a desk for 40 hours a week and do my job. And so that's when I started looking into PM. And, I thought I got to know the Xamarin people then. And I thought everything was really cool that they did. And I was like, it's really fun that it's developer tools. And I'm a developer, but also I'm not a developer because I can't sit still for that long. But I want to work on developer stuff. And so at the end of the summer, I was like, will you guys hire me? And they were like, we don't actually know how to hire you. We have not hired someone yet since we've been acquired in this like role. So maybe, but we'll like call you. And I was like, cool. So I ended up doing like an official interview loop and blah, blah, blah. And it worked out great. And I got super lucky. Like it was complete, just like a crapshoot that everything fell into place. But yeah, that's how I got in That's how I got my in. I was not really a .NET person until that internship too. I was all C++. I thought I was going to go into GPU design.
Wow.
Yeah.
With the current AI landscape, that would have been a great choice.
No, it would have been a disaster because everything I did was like high performance computing, but 10 years ago, and it's all completely irrelevant.
Well, I'm sure if you could move into Xamarin, you would have moved into AI. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. That's a good point. So,
Uh,
yeah.
that's interesting. So, and then you just worked for Xamarin until the MAUI rebranding, right? Which
Yeah.
was it a rebranding? Was it a rewrite? Like, I want to get a bit of a background as to why you guys did it in the first place. How did that come about?
Yeah. Okay. So there was a bunch of like internal political stuff, like teams moving and management changing. And like we were not in the developer division. And then we were in the developer division and like everything kept changing. And so also, as I'm sure you know, because you've been around, when Xamarin was acquired, they just like stuck Visual Studio onto a bunch of things, like Xamarin tools for Visual Studio, blah, 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 blah. And we got close enough to the rest of the .NET team through various reorgs that we realized we were just like duplicating work, right? And not just Mono, which obviously had its whole own ecosystem and strengths and weaknesses. Like Mono made sense to keep separate a lot. But tooling, like we had now built our own hot reload at this point. And then the XAML hot reload team and the editing continue team were like, what are you guys doing? And we're like, that's a good question. Debugger, all of that stuff. And so we started looking at like what it would take to actually properly integrate Xamarin in. And there was this whole one.net initiative, right? Like we're going to fold Mono in and everything's going to be a big happy family and blah, blah, blah. That's probably like 20. Well, I know when this was. This was February 2020. Because James Montevagno and Dave Ortnow, we were in Seattle for like a team meeting and they were like, we're doing something crazy. And I was like, what? What are we doing, guys? And they were like, we're building a new Xamarin. It's going to be called Project Rockwood Blue. And we were like, okay, okay. But they wanted to fully throw out everything and do MVU, which was Comet had become really popular at that time. And so if none of these words mean things to people, it's fine. It's just gossip at this point. But that was the MVU, like MAUI or Xamarin framework. And so we were like, we're throwing everything out. We're doing MVU. We're starting over. And then we were like, cool, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great. And then like 2 weeks later, everything shut down. And we started to look at how much work that would actually be. And then we were like, well, let's just make Xamarin work with .NET. And then we realized how much that would break things. And so the biggest issue we had with Xamarin was performance, right? Like of UI. And so we wanted to break all the rendering architecture and turn it into handlers. And so we were like, if we're going to make that big of a breaking change, we might as well fold ourselves properly into the .NET brand and get rid of kind of this like Xamarin's like the ugly step sibling on the side thing. Like, let's become more real. And so it was a lot of, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this until we kind of got where we went. It was fun though. It was a really fun, crazy, like 3 or 4 months while we tried to figure out what we were doing and why and just like what it was going to look like. But at the end, kind of what we said, MAUI is the next evolution of Xamarin. For people coming from Xamarin, it shouldn't feel like you're ruining everything. Like it should feel like a good improvement. For people new to Xamarin or to MAUI, it should feel much more like doing a .NET project. So getting rid of the 3 projects and using an actual builder pattern, all these things. And it worked pretty well. MAUI is like now well past Xamarin usage. So good. Yeah.
Wow. Does that include, so I don't know if you can talk about that, but obviously you have relationships with Xamarin customers.
Yeah.
And they would be effectively just forced to migrate because Xamarin is, what that is, just out of support, right?
Yeah.
So out of that number of people who were basically forced to migrate, how many actually migrated to MAUI?
A lot, if not all. I think a couple people use it as an opportunity to go fully native, which probably would have been the right move for them regardless. But Dave and I and, the rest of the folks on the team spent probably a year and a half talking to multiple customers a week when they were like, "Why are you killing Xamarin? What do I do?" And then we had to explain it to them, and then tell them how like the upgrade or the migration process would work. And most of them, if not all of them, ended up doing it successfully. If you started back in .NET 6 when MAUI was like fresh out of the oven and still kind of a hot mess, not a great time. But by the time customers started coming to us, in the past year and a half to like before the .NET 8 and then especially before .NET 9, it was really seamless for a lot of them, which was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Do you think I'm surprised actually that so you got new customers because of the MAUI
yeah,
existence ultimately? Because
yeah.
I'll give you a bit of a background for me. I've never actually used Xamarin on MAUI, like to any serious level. Like I've played around.
Developer, aren't you? Okay, sorry. Continue.
No, the thing is, I've played around with MAUI out of curiosity. Xamarin was just never like something I looked at. But when you go on the homepage of .NET, you see all those things you can do. Right? You see Unity gaming, you see this, you see that, and then you see MAUI. I'm like, if I'm gonna say something about this thing, I might as well try it. And from what I've tried, and from what I've seen in the documentation, it was fine. But I've read so many stories of companies who started with like React Native or Flutter or whatever it was. And then they said, this thing took us here where we are. This is not sustainable anymore. We have to go native.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like anyone is leaving MAUI to go React Native or Flutter. It looks like these companies are leaving that type of technology, the cross-platform aspect, to go native. So
Yeah.
what do you think about like who is this MAUI ultimately for, or React Native or Flutter, any of those technologies? Like, what's the target audience? And do you think that it's a graduatable target audience, which ultimately leads to you losing the customer eventually?
Yeah. I think so. Originally, we thought MAUI was going to be like the Flutter compete, right? Like we were like, we're going to come for Flutter. What we realized is Flutter is for either, basic consumer apps that do stuff that you do on your phone or games because everything's drawn. Where MAUI has found its footing, and React Native is weird because some people swear by it and some people think it is like the devil. So we have always had a hard time pigeonholing it. But where MAUI has found its niche is like line of business apps. So you're a delivery driver and you go to someone's house and you have it plugged into the hardware and they have to sign the package and you scan it and all that stuff because we actually do all the underlying native things down there. And because it feels and looks like the native UI, so you can really, really standardize it based on a specific device or whatever. We have a lot of MAUI running in like factories, right? So like it's on the screens that control the things. Or utility workers for offline support, they go to a site and they, say, this is the line that's out. And then they pull up the map. And then the map says, this is where you have to plug that back in or whatever. We have a bunch of those. And so it's awesome because a lot of those teams are built on .NET in the back end. And so the skill is very transferable now to come and build an app. And because we're really focused on like feeling and looking and, hooking into the native APIs kind of by default, right? Obviously, you can do whatever you want if you customize things enough. That makes it really easy for people who standardize on hardware or have a lot of like hardware integrations, barcode scanners, blah, 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 blah. And then the real like influx, I think, of people to MAUI also came from Blazor Hybrid. Because that was really a nice thing. Because there's a lot of Blazor developers who are like, well, what if I want to do it offline? What if I want to put it on the desktop? And we literally just were like, why don't we just like put it in the MAUI all day? And it works. Like it's not convoluted. And so we have definitely gotten an influx of folks from there too. And so, yeah, it's, like .NET, it kind of skews enterprise.
Yeah.
But we've started to see more and more random use cases pop up through the Blazor world, which is cool.
How do you feel about the whole? There's MAUI, and then there's Avalonia, and then there's Uno.
I love them. I think they are. First of all, for me, as someone who only has a limited number of engineers, or I guess had, as for someone who only has influence on a limited number of engineers. Um, when someone's like, I need you to do this very specific thing for Windows, I'm like, Uno does that. Go use Uno. Like, they're great. Um, they're all like, there's a bit of kind of the way that we talk about MAUI internally is MAUI is .NET on mobile, right? It's not just the UI stack. And so for us, we always say like those things use MAUI, right? Like it is the underlying .NET on mobile stack. Publicly, people are like, well, it's not MAUI because they don't actually use the UI layer. They don't use it. And I'm like, okay, I mean, technically, sure. But colloquially, MAUI is .NET mobile. And so for us, we've always thought of them as both customers and like, I don't know, ecosystem beneficiaries.
Yeah.
It's been good for us to see like where they put their time and energy, like Uno with the designer, the hot design thing has been really cool because we're like, oh, like we hear that as a need all the time. And we've tried addressing it in different ways. And now Uno's trying to address it in this way. And it's good customer like data for us to see, right? How people react to those kinds of things. And Avalonia does all the Linux embedded stuff. So anytime someone's like, build new Linux right now. And I'm like, I would love to go use Avalonia.
Yeah.
Why?
But why is MAUI not looking into doing that?
It is looking into doing it. It's been looking into doing it forever. It's just a priority thing. Like we have so many customers that don't have the need for Linux right now and have other things that they need us to do in MAUI. And so it's hard for us to justify adding a new backend. And also with Linux, you have to pick a UI toolkit, which is a whole political like bee's nest. Yeah. So that was kind of the thing we were trying to avoid. What I've been pressuring now that I'm kind of, is I'm like, just do hybrid on Linux. That's all I care about. Just do hybrid only. Just do that.
Yeah.
And the people, yeah, that'd be cool. And I'm like, okay, I'm waiting. And so it's definitely something that we still think about, but a lot of these like line of business customers in particular, they have Android devices or they have tablets, you know? And so we don't hear it as much from the people who are using it. And so once we feel like we're in a good place with just like where everyone who is using it is we're getting pretty close to, I think Linux is going to be one of the top items off the board. So.
Yeah, I would expect, like, Microsoft has a bit of a reputation where they just do things when there isn't necessarily a market yet.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to make this, Blazor because Steve Sanderson just came up with it, and why not, right? And maybe the audience, or the target audience will appear. And in many cases it has. But, with Linux and Mac and everything, like, it's there. The audience is there. But I think in many cases as well, and I'll be very honest with this, I think if there's one fundamental thing that is slowing Microsoft down and .NET down, is Visual Studio. I think Visual Studio and the fact that it's Windows only is like shackles on the potential of many things. Because like you said, with designers, with like so much customization that is needed and tooling to make a great experience on that front. Obviously, it's too late to make Visual Studio cross-platform. And I have noticed that Microsoft is kind of trying to move people towards Visual Studio Code, rightfully so, in my opinion. Xamarin Studio, Visual Studio Code for Mac, or Visual Studio for Mac, was killed. And I think that's an effort to move more things into Visual Studio Code. Do you see a world where Visual Studio becomes the second priority and Visual Studio Code is the IDE?
We had this conversation probably like 12 times a day internally because we're all trying to figure this out, right? Where I settled and where a lot of people have settled is like Visual Studio exists for a reason. And it is incredibly popular for a reason. And Rider's great on Mac. Like, I know you use Rider a lot. And so that's kind of the, we'll be like, there's a market for IDEs. There's a market for people who want that kind of power user, like full airplane cockpit situation. And I don't think it's ever going to become like a second class citizen. We look at it as like the premier experience, right? But what we are realizing is to get someone to start using .NET and then having them to go to a website and download a 20 gigabyte IDE with about 7 million buttons on the page instead of installing an extension into the thing they already have on their computer. Yeah, like that is a heavy, heavy lift.
Yeah.
And so we are definitely putting more effort into VS Code than we were previously. I mean, we're working on, what the next Visual Studio might be and look like, right? So it's not like we're just going to let VS rot. There's no plan to do that. And there's a lot of things in VS that don't really fit in VS Code because the VS Code team is very like, this is an editor and you add things to the editor. Do not shove all your Visual Studio isms into it. And so a lot of the diagnostics tooling or things like, I don't know, there's so many examples. The design surfaces and all those stuff, like VS Code doesn't want those. And if they do, they want it as a separate extension that's not shoved upon people when you download it the first time, right? Like they want it to be an extension pack. So for us, we've had to totally change like how we build developer tools in thought because we're like, oh yeah, well just let them click that. And then people are like, why would I right click something? This is Visual Studio Code. What are you doing? And we're like, oh yeah, you're right. But VS is still getting, new features and new love. It's so much more mature compared to the .NET story in C#, in VS Code that it's going to appear and move slower because we're not doing as much because it's got everything. I keep saying, just throw away Visual Studio, rewrite it in MAUI. And that will be the ultimate, like, MAUI. MAUI is used internally. It's legit. It's production. And people are like, you can't just throw out an IDE that's been there for 20 years and rewrite it in MAUI because you'd think it would be fun. And I was like, okay, that's fair.
But it's not about the fun thing. It's like there's a legitimate, like, business reason to do that. Like having it's WPF, right?
Yeah, it's WPF. Yeah.
So for me, and by the way, I've spoken with Microsoft people, even on the Visual Studio Code team and marketing and everything, and I know a lot that I can't say because if I say, I'm in big trouble. But like clearly, there's something that needs to be done on that front. Because now you have like the C# dev kit extension, but then you ship Aspire, but Aspire doesn't have any real tooling outside of Visual Studio. So you isolate Visual Studio Code users, which is your own users, in danger that if you put the tooling in the CLI or somewhere else, Rider will use it and sell more Rider. But Rider go and do their own thing because they made the extension and they made the debugger and they made everything anyway. So the only one who's losing here is Microsoft.
Yeah. Me personally, and I think this is probably because I've been on Mac and on the mobile side for so long, I am so not bothered by Rider using our stuff. I think that's great. Like, as someone who had to work on the VS Mac side of things for a long time, maintaining 2 IDEs was such a time sink. It was so much work. And so if Rider wants to do that, like, great. More power to you. Do that for me. And it's good. I mean, I know people who use it and love it and they want to be in an IDE. So where I bet is like, okay, Rider's not going to compete with VS Code because that's not what it is. It's an IDE.
Yeah.
And so, like if I'm building a bunch of command line things or VS Code isms, Rider can totally use them, but it's not going to improve their experience the way it's going to improve someone's experience in VS Code. And that's why I'm kind of like, whatever, use it. I don't care. And they build a good product. Like if Rider was like awful and made .NET look bad, it would be a different story. But since Rider's good,
I'll be very honest. The latest versions of Rider have been very disappointing. Just because they've been messing up memory, they've been messing up performance. It's thank God for this little puppy over here being able to handle with that 128 gigabytes of RAM. But no, Rider has been going into a bit of a downward spiral lately. In my experience, but
building IDEs is
hard. But in a way, it is hard, especially in Java. Yeah. But in a way, Rider doesn't really have any competition on Mac and Linux.
Yeah.
from
I mean,
Microsoft. I mean, from anywhere really.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess they don't. It's their competition is really VS Code
Yeah,
as
and that's an editor with the plugin, which turns into
right.
an ID like experience.
A whole different world.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a different thing, right? So it's a bit of a funny position that you haven't covered that, and all that is after all the chat about .NET is cross platform and so on, and then you have Visual Studio, but sorry, Visual Studio Code, but you don't have Visual Studio. It's just a bit of a confusing market. That's I think you guys have to do something about that. I don't know if you want to buy JetBrains or if you have any interest in that, or if you want to rewrite. I think your idea is great. Just rewrite the thing, Maui.
That's my dream. That's my dream. Every time I say that, I see like 4 people just go like, when we moved it to 64-bit, it was the most insane project. There was so much stuff that had to be like there's
Yeah.
skeletons in every closet in VS. And so I get that people who actually understand how these things work and aren't just like some dinky PM are like, oh no, that's not we'd have to throw everything away and start over, and that's a lot. And so I understand the like curl clutching, but in a great, imaginary fake world where everything's easy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I was about to say something I forgot, but I think it was a great question. I think if it comes back, I'll just throw it your way again. But just to go a bit back onto Maui, what do you think is the biggest mistake you guys did during the rebrand and the rewrite and everything? Like, if you had to pinpoint something and say that we fucked up, this should never happen again, or should have happened.
yeah, I think we when we shipped .NET 6, we did it because we knew that Maui was not in a place that an end user would be able to use it and be happy. But we also knew that because library maintainers were so scarred from UI frameworks like being killed left and right, nobody would have started building their NuGet packages for it. And so then when we did eventually ship it, people would be like, well, I can't migrate because there's no package ecosystem for it. And so we were like, we're just going to ship it. We're going to make a big splash. We're going to be like, it's here. Very exciting. Everything's great. Let's, get the package maintainers moving, and then we'll kind of come with everybody else at the end. I don't think we messaged that right.
Mhm.
Like, I think if we said it was like a package maintainer release, like it was like the RC, like I don't think people would have believed us. So I think we did need to ship it something GA, but we should probably have not made the splash until .NET 7. And we should have said in .NET 6, like, hey, this thing's GA. We're really excited about it. We need the ecosystem to catch up. And then we're going to start working with customers. And then, next year's the year we're going to make the big splash when we actually have people like successfully upgrading to it. Because we started off basically digging ourselves into a giant hole. And then we've been working our way out since. And it's a lot better now. And so, we all love Reddit. So we'll look at the Reddit comments, and it's gone from I know, I'm triggered. It's okay. I have a burner. I don't use my personal Reddit to look at .NET stuff because it makes me so angry. So, yeah.
I'm not gonna say anything on that. Reddit loves me.
Yes.
Fuck you guys.
Yes. Correct. Good answer. Yeah, we'll look at it. A couple years ago, it was Maui sucks, blah, blah, blah. I want to go back to Xamarin. And now it's like, oh yeah, Maui sucks, it hates it. And then the comments are like, actually, I've been using Maui and it's not bad.
Yeah.
And as we see more actualities, we're like, oh, we are doing our job. Like, we still fucked up the original perception, but the product truth is there now, or very close to being what it needs to be. And so that's just going to take a while to get everybody's line back on the right page. So
it looks like release. Microsoft has this very weird way of releasing stuff. It's like I talk too fast. I play a lot of games, and many games release before they're ready for reasons other than the game itself. And a game released in a bad state is bad forever, while a delayed game is eventually good.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that a lot with some, because many people, I'm sure, they had this first impression of MAUI in .NET 6. They tried it, it's not for them, moved away to something else, and now it's too late to get them back. In the same way that .NET is cross-platform, it's like this amazing technology, but everyone has that first impression of this. You have to use Windows, you have to use a VS, you have to, yeah. And first impressions matter. So it's very rare for Microsoft to release something that releases the right way. I do believe that surprisingly, Aspire is one of those products, mainly because it is spearheaded by people who don't really care about anyone above them, I think, or like David and Damien, these cowboys. It's a very select elite, I would say, that I aspire to get to that point at some point in my life. But like I imagine, Stephen Tobe, Damien, Scott Hanselman, these types of people who will just say anything, just go ahead and do it, and no one will stop them. And releasing Aspire just randomly without really telling anyone. They told us a month before it was released. And then it's here, and try it and play around with it. But it's not GA, it's like in preview. So we're going to do our own thing with releases, and you're going to have this 9.1, 9.2, while .NET 10 is released. And it's like, I think this brings back what I remember when the first .NET Core RCs were released, where things, you release the DNX model with a JSON file, and then you scrap it because it's not right, and you go back. And I really like that. I think it should be done more.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think you made a great career choice as well, joining that team, which we will talk about a bit later. But there are a few like MAUI questions I want to talk about before we go to Aspire. So we said that .NET MAUI space in the market is more of those like line of work and enterprise and maybe internal applications and so on. And that is fine. But if I said I want to build the next Facebook, I want to build like a more complex application with .NET Aspire, do you see any reason why I would choose that and go to production with that? Is it worth investing in native? Is it worth saying, okay, how many people do you expect to use it? And what requirements you have in like UX and UI that are hard requirements and you cannot violate them in any way? What would you say to that?
Yeah. You said Aspire, by the way. You're doing what I do, but you just make me Aspire.
MAUI. I have my notes, and it's just Aspire and MAUI in big bold letters.
I literally should have a swear jar for the amount of times I'm like, I like had just finally stopped saying Xamarin too, and then I was like, they didn't. Anyways, yeah, I think with cross-platform in general, all of those things are possible. It just depends on what you want. We have, like the Fidelity Pro Trader app or whatever that came on monster. That thing is a machine. And like that is complicated. And there are charts and things and async and poll, and it's just it's a machine. And so it's definitely possible. And if you want to build a cross-platform app, like if your company is structured in a way and you have the .NET expertise and blah blah blah, I don't see why not. The reason I see a lot of people going native is because the platforms do a lot of, well, unique is not really what it is anymore. They're kind of the same, but in different ways. But really intricate native experiences are much easier to build. Like when you hold an icon down on iOS and it gives you those options. Like we have that in MAUI, but there's more power when you do it through Swift. Or just like widgets and that kind of stuff. You can build those in MAUI. It's possible, but you have to kind of work around both the Android and Apple-isms. And then you don't get that on Windows and Mac. And so when you do it in fully native in Swift, you get this like really nice embedded full native experience. And there's a ton of examples of that. And so if you really care about your user experience in that way, like you want this to be the most delightful iOS experience for people, you probably want to go native. The thing is, most people don't actually need that. Yeah. At some point, the graduation question, like do people graduate to native? It's such a heavy lift to do that it's not really a graduation. It's like they failed out and they have to start over more than anything. Um, and a lot of people will be able to extend MAUI or React or Flutter or whatever to be exactly what they need. Um, the desktop thing can be either a benefit or a hindrance, depending on where, like what the way you look at it, right? If you don't want to be building desktop apps, which are becoming less and less popular as the web becomes more and more fully featured, like a browser. Having the cross-platform thing is great because you get the desktop app, you get the store presence, you get the offline support, blah 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 blah. You get that all for free. But if you don't really care about desktop and you really want like this super embedded native experience, then yeah, I would say, well, you could do cross-platform. There's no reason that it would not work. But if you want to have like the most iOS-y feeling or the most Android-y feeling, it's going to be easiest to do it in those native platforms, probably. You just have to have two teams at that point, or one team who knows two languages.
Yeah.
So, straight off.
Another thing is, I feel like Microsoft has a bit of a demo problem because showing things is one thing, like functionality wise, but they don't look great from like the way they look.
Yes.
It just, I can tell if something is a MAUI app without you telling me it's a MAUI app, or I can tell something is made in Blazor before you tell me it's made in Blazor. And I shouldn't know that because other companies or products don't do that.
Yeah.
Like there should be in dev like a demo designer who just goes around with a whip and says, "Don't do that."
Yeah. It's so funny because Dave Ortnow is like did a lot of design before he came to Xamarin. And so you should see the things before Dave touches them. Like Dave will come in and whip people and he's like, okay, at least now there's a gradient in here. And we're like, cool. Yeah, we've gone back and forth on that. I think Blazor, so the Aspire dashboard's a good example. Like if you know Blazor, you know that's Blazor out.
Yeah.
If you don't know Blazor, you're like, a website. What an interesting Fluent UI toolkit. Like, for us, for the .netters, it's a little bit more obvious when things pop out. We're trying to get better. eShop was a really big, like we didn't have our people build eShop. Like we really didn't want it to look like .net. And so they had people in design and we obviously gave them build it, but we've been trying to not make things look so Microsofty or .net-y or whatever. But at the same time, if someone's like, pick a toolkit, pick a UI toolkit, we're going to pick Fluent because we own it. The same way that Google is going to pick Material or something. So, yeah, I hear you. We've considered just like upworking things before and having someone go in and make things not look.
Yeah, I just a bit of a comment, and I think I see it quite a bit. Enough with MAUI, because MAUI is not really a part of your life anymore. It's
not true.
It's left behind. You betrayed them. You just shut the door, and the entire team hates you. I know.
Yeah, totally.
No, but you said it's your first child, and you will always love it.
Yeah,
but you have a second kid now.
I do.
Their name is Aspire. So that's a weird name for a kid, but okay, I get it.
Yeah.
How did that come around? Why did you backstab all your colleagues?
Yeah. Why did I turn around? It was really easy. It was a decision I made it overnight. No, around in March.
So editor's note, it was a very easy decision.
No, okay. Tell you the real story because I have the time to tell you the real story. Most people, I'm like, what I said on Reddit when this came out at .NET is like, I'm still on the MAUI team, right? Like I left sort of, but I was still involved in MAUI. Like people message me about MAUI shit. I go into meetings and I'm like, well, this doesn't work for MAUI. But people on Aspire are so sick of me talking about MAUI. Like it's not like I just like turned around. Even I think last night we were in a meeting and I was like, cries in MAUI because we were talking about workloads or something. And I was like, cries in MAUI. So anyways, probably around February or March, .NET 8 was so, oh my God, it's been a year. .NET 8 MAUI went over like pretty well. People were like, damn, this is the release you guys should have had the first time. And we were like, cool. And I was always on the tooling side. Like my jam has always been. What we had been working on for a long time was quality and talking customers off the ledge, right? And so I was spending a lot of time talking customers off the ledge, but then there was a lot less of that because .NET 8 was pretty solid. And tooling wise, there was a bunch of this AI stuff coming up. But we had also, there was a lot of things I wanted to do in VS Code. There were a lot of things to do, but we didn't really have like the time or whatever to float it in. And so for a few months, probably for like half a year, I had been kind of feeling like I was just like there and giving opinions. And so I started complaining. I was like, I need more ownership. I need more. And my grad manager, he's a sweetheart. He was like, would you move teams? And I literally go like, not over my dead body. I remember this very distinctly. I was like, you will pry MAUI on my cold dead hands. Like, no, you need to give me like a tooling team. I want to be able to, I want to own VS Code. I want this extension. And he was like, pats on head. And he was like, well, if God, he's so, the poor thing, he's so patient. He goes, if you were to go anywhere in .NET, like, would you go anywhere? And I was like, the only thing that I would consider is Aspire because I think the messaging is so fucking bad and that they are just throwing shit out and it's driving me nuts. However, I know nothing about the cloud and so it doesn't actually make sense for me to go there. Little did I know, like he went and he turned around and he started talking to people and a couple months, maybe like a month later, he was like, so if you want to go to Aspire, they'll like let you go to Aspire. Like you should go to Aspire. And I was like, no, why would you put me over there? And the way they sold me on it is basically, which is so funny, this is very me. They were like, well, you can actually like be kind of mean and say no to David and Damien. And someone just needs to like tell them no sometimes. And I was like, I could do that. Stupidest reason to pick a job. But I was like, yeah, you know what? Like, I'm not afraid of them. I'll go in and I'll whip things into shape. And I think that people really liked how mad I was. The cloud native stack for building, like every time people brought it up, I literally, you guys are just saying words. Like this doesn't mean anything. Yeah. And so they were like, well, why don't you come over to Aspire for a bit? Try out helping them figure out messaging, figure out like what kind of .NET 9 and Aspire 9 should look like, and we'll see what happens. And so I started doing that like side by side, and then mostly by June, I think I was doing Aspire and messaging and blah, blah, blah. And by the end of the summer, I was like, this is my second kid. You will pry this out of my cold dead hands. I was like, okay, yeah. And around that point is when they were like, okay, like Maddie's in it. Like, we'll let her actually own the roadmap and things, and we'll let Damien go work on a bunch of other cool stuff. And so Damien, obviously, Damien, poor thing, talks to me about 36 hours a day. Him and Fowler both, but Damien especially, I'm always complaining about things. And he's always like, go look at the data. And I'm like, okay, you're right. But I'm still complaining. That's fine. So it's not like I replaced him by any means, but the messaging stuff, like he wanted to go build, a functional testing experience for Aspire. And so I was like, oh, I'll go fight with the marketing people over what we should put on the website. Like I freed up that part of him. And so, yeah, it's been really fun. I do think it was the right move for me. If anything, just because it was a new challenge and I'm still every day Googling new things. And at MAUI, I was getting pretty, like, I was like, you can't say anything I haven't heard. Like, complain to me all you want. I heard it. I know what to say. And so I was definitely getting not complacent, but I was comfortable. And I needed to be like a little smacked around. I needed someone to like knock that out of me. I needed to make me comfortable again. So
yeah,
that was.
If I would say no to David and Damien as my job, I'd do it for free. To be honest, but the money is just extra.
Oh, it's so fun! It's so much fun.
I just wasted.
Actually, that's a couple months ago. We got in like an actual argument about something, and he's been really nice to me because he doesn't want to like scare me off. And finally, we like got in some argument. I was like, no, that's a terrible idea. And then afterwards, he goes, "That was our first fight." I know, this is the best day of my life. So it's been very, very fun.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent career move. I'll be honest. Like, 10 out of 10, would recommend. I think if I was to do a full-time job for a company again, I think working in Aspire in some capacity, like developer advocacy or engineering or program management, it would be sick.
Yeah.
So yeah, all I'm saying is I'm very jealous of you.
Thank you
for your position.
What was I? And also luck. I just keep lucking into things. So
No, no. Preparation meets opportunity.
yeah, very good. Thank
That's
you.
that's luck.
I like that. I'm gonna use that.
So how I wrote this down and I'm looking at the questions and I wrote it as if I'm not gonna ask it. Because I have a question mark around it. The question is how hard is it working with Damian and David?
Thank God. Um,
You're about to have your second argument.
guys, I'm sure Copilot is recapping this for Damien. No, actually, Damien's watching this at 2x speed right now.
Yeah.
And a Copilot see if I mentioned him and scrubbing to this point in the video to see what I say about him. So hi guys. Um, it's great. I mean, they they have opinions, right? And so for me, I'm not afraid when someone's like, no, that's a bad idea. I think it was like yesterday, Damien and I were fighting about if the Visual Studio Git ignore is dumber. And he was like, who cares about it? Why would anyone care about that? And I was like, it's 400 lines, dude. Like we're git ignoring things from content coverage or code coverage tools that were deprecated 5 years ago. And then finally, I like start sending him screenshots, and he's like, "Wait, why is that in there? Why is that in there?" And so, for me, as someone who likes to prove people wrong, like by gut, it's very easy because they're always like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," and then I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa," and then we find compromise somehow. Um, there are times I think where it's like intimidating because they know so much, and they built .NET Core. Like I'll be like, why don't we just do this? And they're like, we've tried to do that 7 times, and when we were building .NET Core, we did this, and I'm like, oh fuck, you guys have like context that I can't even imagine. Like I think I was still like underage drinking when they built .NET Core. I was just around to AIDS drinking. I was just getting there, I think. And so, there's times where I say something and I'm like, oh, yeah, you guys definitely have thought of this. I'm not a genius coming up with these ideas for the first time. You guys have tried to do this 100 times. And that's probably the most challenging part is just like knowing what I don't know and being okay knowing what I don't know. But they're fun and they're smart and Aspire's breaking a lot of rules. And I kind of have this free air coverage because like you said, like Fowler, Damien, Sanderson, Tobe, like a lot of these really amazing .NET people, they're not afraid to get up there and be like, no, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We're doing it this way. And so when I have some crazy ideas, once I get them on board, they're going to give me the air cover to do it, or they're going to know kind of work through to make it happen. And so, yeah, it's been very fun. And not that MAUI, we were pretty cowboyish in Xamarin and MAUI. Like we did a lot of whatever we wanted. But, at a certain point, we were like, okay, the quality has to come up. And we did that for a year and a half. And at that point, I was I was the one providing air coverage for people at that point. Like people were like, I want to do this. And I was like, cool, I'll go fight about that. So it's fun to kind of just be like not in the background, but like, I don't have to fight as much anymore. There are people fighting for me. I'm not the arguer. And so, yeah, it's been great. I mean, there are definitely times where like the two of them, this is so random. I'm so sorry, YouTube viewers. There is a claymation Christmas movie from the 60s. It is called A Year Without a Santa Claus. And one of the plots is that Santa, have you seen this?
I have no idea what you're about to say, but I'm invested.
Okay. Santa gets sick and doesn't want to do Christmas. He's not feeling good. And so Mrs. Claus goes to the snow miser and says, hey, if you make it snow in the South, Santa will be excited enough to go to Christmas. And he's like, that's cool and all, but you have to go talk to my brother, the heat miser, because he owns the South. And the heat miser is like, absolutely the fuck not, dude. Like, I'll let it snow in the South when you let it like be sunny and like 100 degrees in the North. And they get in this like fight over the 60s version of Skype. And they both have songs. It's very fun. You should see. It's like an hour long. It's the stupidest, most amazing movie. So Mrs. Claus is like, you know what? If you guys can't settle this, I'm taking it to the top. And they were like, no, no. And their mom is Mother Nature. And so they just fight. And she goes, boys. And a lightning thing comes down and goes, and they go, yes, mother. I've referenced this now like 400 times because none of them have seen this movie. I keep telling them to see this movie. I'm like, you guys don't understand how perfect this is because they'll go off in a meeting and everyone will be sitting there like this, like they're fighting again. And it's fun because like obviously they always end up on the same page and it's never personal. But like Evie will be like, blah, 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 and Damien's like, what? And then at some point, I'm just like, guys, shut the fuck out. And every time in my head, I'm
Mother Nature is coming down on you.
and so that is like it's very fun. I love that. People think that they're like two peas in a pod and they never disagree. They fight all the time.
Yeah, no, you can tell.
Yeah,
But like constructive fighting, I think they learn a lot talking to each other in any way. Like just great combo. Rest in peace, Skype. By the way, you just mentioned that, and it's been a sad day.
you know.
I had to back up all of my conversations, so I don't lose them. So I know.
Oh God, yeah. It's a wild ride for sure.
Yeah,
So.
but I'm sure having the authority is great, but I'm sure you're learning a lot about like
3 minutes
context. Yeah. Like I'd love to work with these suits. Yeah, like I said, you're lucky.
Yeah.
So obviously being able to tell Damien and David to fuck off is a great reason to take the job. But what actually makes you excited about Aspire? Because you mentioned messaging, and I do think messaging wise is a massive problem with Aspire.
Yes. Yeah. That was the thing that sucked me in, like the rage around it. The more I've gotten to like understand what customers are doing and like talk to people and seeing the convoluted shit people do to develop an app, the more I think I probably say once a week, I don't know how anyone ships software. I don't know how any of this stuff runs. This is all crazy to me because everything is duct taped together. Like it is terrifying. And you onboard someone and it takes like 2 weeks to get them to be able to run the app on their device. Like what are we doing? What are we doing as a society? This is embarrassing. We should be able to do more than this. And so that's the thing about Aspire that excites me the most. Is like, we're not trying to black box anything, right? We're not trying to like say, oh, you use this and now you're vendor locked into this thing. It's very much like we're just trying to help you get off the ground and then you can grow out of it. And excuse me, I had done a lot with App Center. Ugh, rip in peace. Has MAUI, mobile, blah, blah, blah. And my fundamental issue with App Center was that you couldn't grow up into a big girl Azure service, is what I used to say. Like, once you hit the limits of App Center, you had to start over. And I was like, with Firebase or something, everything's actually just GCP. And when you're ready, you go into big girl Google. Like, you're ready. You move on. And so Aspire was built with that in mind. Like, if you use Aspire for orchestration and then you use the client integrations to like do your databases. And then at some point you're like, you know what? I actually don't like the way that they're setting this up. I'm going to do it my own way. You don't rip anything out. You just keep going. And so that was like a really, really big sell for me early. And then deployment was a whole other world that I did not understand. And the more I've looked at it, I don't know how anyone gets anything done. DevOps is insane.
Yeah.
I don't know. But trying to bring that theory of like grow outableness instead of just replacing into deployment has been a very, very fun challenge to try and like tease apart. I Google something probably 3 times a day. Like I hear a new word like Helm chart, octopus, blah, blah, blah. Those were early ones. And now it's like, I don't know. A new JavaScript framework runner. I'm like, what is this thing? Like, what are we talking about? Always. So
yeah, deployment it's a lot. I remember in like 3 years at work, my last work, we changed how we deploy 3 or 4 times from Terraform like scripts to TeamCity to Jenkins to Octopus. Like
Yep.
every team had their own opinion on how deployments should work and versioning and rollbacks and zero downtime. It's like there must be a better way. And we had like the F5 test, which I've talked about with the David Fowler episode about how long does it take for someone to pull the code down and everything they need, press F5 and the thing works. And it's the jankiest Docker Compose execution automated thing through CLI with CLI wrap, and things have to like fall in place exactly. And then you have, if this fails 5 times, do a task dot delay for 10 seconds because eventually it might work. It's
Yep.
janky. So
Yep.
Aspire is trying to fix that.
Yeah. And it kind of marries my love for tooling with like actual platform work. Because Aspire is a platform. Aspire has tooling, right? Like out Aspire and running it as tooling, but it's a developer productivity platform. And that to me is like marrying all the things because I don't want to go and design APIs that's like not for me. I don't want to say like we need a button that has rounded corners. Like I can't do that. But making it so that like the level of jank decreases, I love that.
Yeah.
Because I get so frustrated with it. I'm dumb. I'm a PM, like I don't know what I'm doing. So if I can pull down a code, like a repo and run it and understand what's going on in the app and like add a Redis cache to it in like an hour and not Clive, that is such a win for me. And as more people enter the workforce, college is getting better, university is getting better about teaching people cloud concepts, but every company does it so differently.
Yeah.
Like learning how to deploy the product you work on is like the first year of your job.
Yeah.
Just like, how does this change actually make it? I don't know. So lowering that barrier to entry has been very fun.
Yeah. The entire proposition, however, like you said, is this cloud native distributed systems, opinionated, and then more words. And even though true at the time of release, I don't think that that's the selling point anymore. Now it's just their way to run your system locally to do stuff. Like if you want the database or Redis cache, just pull the component down, the hosting package. You get an instrumented library. You can see traces. You can see the spans. You can see everything, and it's just there for you by default.
Yeah.
Which, it reminds me of a lot of Spring Boot, and it's like there's things like this out there. It's not a unique concept, obviously. Like Microsoft is in .NET in many ways. It's the Apple of like phones, where they see the ideas and they try to refine it and make something better. They did with Java. They're doing it now, and I think the messaging that will be the way to run .NET applications is way more approachable and relatable than the cloud native distributed systems that, let's be honest, the majority of .NET developers don't use.
Yeah.
So the way it was packaged, it's like, new stuff, new developers, new fancy cloud stuff, that's Aspire and that's the niche of a niche. But if you package it a different way, then everyone can use it. And everyone can get a step closer to OpenTelemetry. And everyone can, because ultimately you want to sell stuff, right? You want to sell AI, you want to sell Azure. So everyone can eventually wire up to App Insights to push their OpenTelemetry metrics into App Insights and eventually use the managed service of Redis that you have and so on. So do you see a future where .NET Run can have an Aspire setting and it just spins up with Aspire?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I the first thing I said when I started was like, nobody really identifies as a cloud native developer unless they're writing custom Kubernetes bullshit.
Yeah.
And really Aspire is for anyone whose goes to the cloud, which is every app. Like there are so few apps on this planet that do not use the cloud in some way.
Yeah.
Whether it's on-prem or Azure or whatever, like the type of cloud doesn't matter. And so we started really thinking about Aspire as like a developer tool, right? Like Aspire is the way to build modern apps without wanting to like shoot yourself in the face. We started playing around with things like it's building modern microservices without the pain of building modern microservices, like that kind of stuff. Was what we started to play around with. We landed on something more tangible, like it's tools, templates, and packages for building today's apps. And how we say today kind of changes on the context. Like we say distributable, modern, or distributed, or resilient, or whatever it is. So that's where we're trying to shift things. As far as .NET, yeah, every .NET app should be Aspire. If anything, just because it turns on OpenTelemetry and Poly, like easy. But I've been looking more in the polyglot world because we have a lot of JavaScript front end, .NET back end. And then also if we're going to grow .NET, we have to get outside of .NET. And so what can Aspire, how do we talk about Aspire to like a JavaScript developer, like someone who's doing like Node full stack? And how is it actually useful for them besides just being Docker Compose on crack? And why every app should be using Aspire, really. Like anytime you build an app, polyglot or otherwise, it should be an Aspire app. And that's where I've been spending a lot of my like brain power. It's weird. It's funny because Spring Boot definitely was one of the original inspirations for Aspire. Like Spring Boot's great, but .NET, we're not going to take Java. Like we're not going to steal people from Java.
No,
Java developers, right? And so at a certain point, I think we all kind of realize marketing as a Spring Boot compete is great for .NET developers. They're like, cool, now we have this thing that Java has. But for actually growing .NET, a Java person doesn't care about that.
In my opinion, you shouldn't like, and sometimes I mention it. I don't mention it because I think you're trying to compete, because I don't think there's a company that's full of Java developers running Spring Boot that will say, we're going to ditch that entire knowledge base and just move to .NET because it's faster, for example. Even if it is, nobody cares. People like can use way slower languages. It's not about that. Like, obviously, if you're using Python and you have Flask and you're happy with what you're doing and you have your developers know Flask, you wouldn't retrain them or fire them to go in .NET. That's insane. But having the alternative of something as great that other languages have, that's the, like, a Java developer can say, yeah, I'm not using .NET because there's no Spring Boot. Actually, there is. It's called Aspire.
Yeah.
And it would be very fun if it was .NET Boot.
That would be so...
That would be sick.
No. There's a bot now, because every time I try to write a blog, I never put .NET in front of Aspire. I just call it Aspire. Yeah. And there's a bot that goes in and fixes every single one of my PRs so that everything says .NET Aspire, because that's the official name. And I'm like, it's just Aspire. It's Aspire. It's Aspire. It doesn't need to be .NET. Like,
I do the same, because when I do a workshop on Aspire, it's like building distributed systems in .NET with Aspire. Because if I say with .NET Aspire, it's like so stupid.
It's so dumb. Yep.
Come on. Also, the same way I have to say ASP.NET, but when I use it on websites, I have to put it together because, I have to make space with ASP space.net. Otherwise, it becomes a website and it's embedded. It's like,
It's so funny. It's so, like, for people who've been around, we know how it got here.
Yeah.
But for people new to it, it's like, what in God's name are you guys doing? It's so funny. It cracks me out.
So, will I get an Aspire command?
Maybe. If you look at the repo right now, you may or may not answer your question. Which is yes.
Yeah.
I used it last night for the first time. I'm very excited.
I've seen something in person because obviously we met in NDC London and I saw like a prototype at the time.
Yeah.
How much of that? Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I told you about this, and really what we want is to, you're a .NET guy. All you .NET people are probably watching. you probably go to other people and they're like, yeah, I use .net and it's great. And everyone goes,
Yeah.
.net? Yeah, like, oh, that's old. Like, we did customer interviews last year on like .net perception, and someone was like, I'm not smart enough for .net. I wouldn't be able to implement my own linked list. And we were like, what? Like, what? Um, and so what I want to do is make it easier for you people to go to your friends and colleagues and whatever and say, yeah, I use .net. And they go, ooh, and they go, no, actually, .net is not what you think it is. Because even if you look at like an Aspire app host program CS, it doesn't look like C# did 10 years ago.
No.
It looks so clean. And people don't realize that because they just they think of .net as a certain thing. And they also think of it as heavy
Yeah.
to install in Visual Studio and Windows and all this stuff. And so for us to get people outside of the .net ecosystem to use Aspire and .net, but especially Aspire, we really want to like abstract away a lot of the .net isms,
Yeah.
which, yeah. And so the first thing is basically, we want to build a really lightweight CLI that you can run in VS Code, Linux, or blah, 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 that just does the .net run stuff, does the pack, but you don't realize, you realize it's .net because you're not an idiot and you see the dependency get installed with it, but you don't realize you're just running .net run.
Yeah.
And when you look at a C# file, you probably think, oh, that's some cool custom .net, and then you realize, no, that's just what C# is now.
Yeah.
Like, whoa. And this is kind of a huge leap of faith because they don't actually have the proof that a JavaScript or a Python developer is going to add Aspire to their app.
Yeah.
And then see, oh my God, like this is what .net's like. That's cool. And then go to build a new framework or a new microservice or something and be like, oh, maybe I'll use .net. Well, I have no idea if this is going to work or not.
But this is really. It's so funny you say that. I'm watching a lot of YouTube, and I'm always looking for ideas and see how .net is perceived. And I found this guy who was trying .net for the first time. He's like, I'm gonna make this thing in .net for the first time, completely blind, without reading docs or anything. And he starts a new project, and I think the project was in just the new like top level statements.
Yeah.
Hello world.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I think I screwed up something. This looks too simple. It can't be .net. And he went and found a C#8 example that wasn't using top-level statements with namespaces that are not file-specific, by the way. So like 4 levels of nesting because this felt too simple to be C#. And I was like, what the fuck? Stop. This is not Java. This is crazy.
Oh my God.
It's like, it's too simple to be .net. What the hell?
This keeps me up at night.
I'm like, I want to start reacting to all of those because, like, guys, it is .net. And we also, by the way, on that topic, we have friendly fire as well because even our own .net developers are like, this is not enterprise enough for me to be C#. I'm like, can you stop using that word? It's not a good word. Enterprise is a bad word. Stop saying it. Yeah. You don't. Yeah. If you like your job and you want to keep getting money, you don't want to say .net because you're not gonna get new developers. The most .net developers the most C# developers we're getting is Unity. It is not microservices, not anything else. So you just have a chance for those to convert into because maybe their backend for the game needs a .net server. And since they write C#, they might think they're going to rewrite. Now, mind you, these two different flavors of C#, completely different.
Yep.
But by selling .NET as this enterprise language, you're not going to get new juniors. New juniors means not new hires, meaning you're going to stay in your senior position for longer. So ultimately, it's just this self-fulfilling loop of just hating yourself. So stop hating yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. And we don't break anything. I mean, we break things, actually. That's a term. But we try not to, when we do something like top-level statements, obsolete the enterprisey, like traditional P style. Because, yeah, at a certain point, you probably do want that kind of structure. You can grow up into it. Like, this is the whole thing. You don't have to. I mean, nobody in JavaScript land does it, and they're fine. Fine, as fine as you can be as a JavaScript developer. But you can, this is what you can do at all. But when you're new and you look at something with like 4 friggin' layers of semicolons or of curly braces, and the news and you're like, this looks like C++, but like scarier.
Yeah,
That
and that says a lot because C plus plus. I'm not gonna go into that. I recently tried to learn, and I'm like, wow, this language is gone. It's too
yeah,
gone.
yeah, it's deep. It's deep, and yeah, I look at I think I did something where I just showed someone the Aspire app host.
Yeah.
And without the file name or anything. And I was like, what language do you think this is? And they were like, I don't know. What one of the modern ones? Like it's not Go. It's not anything like that.
It's Rust.
Python. Yeah. And I was like, phew.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm hoping like this is the big bet that I've like kind of hitched my career to right now, that gaslighting people into using .NET without realizing it is going to like greatly increase .NET.
I have
a lot of different ways I talk about it.
That would be such a great idea for a video, like getting 5 senior, 5 junior, and 5 mid developers to try to use .NET for the first time. That would be a sick idea.
That's really good. That's free customer research for me too. So anyway,
how do I produce that? Is the question.
Yeah, you have to. You're gonna have to do like behind like a black wall, so it's to you. That would be so much fun.
That would be
like
fun.
Yeah, there's some crazy things we've heard. When I was right before NDC, I was in Amsterdam for literally a day, and we were talking to the Dutch police force, and they're like a completely polyglot shop. So they have people running every language. And there was one Java guy that came and he was like, so like .NET's like open source and stuff now? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, but like really? Like doesn't it have an ecosystem around it? And I was like, bitch, what? Yes. And like there are real like expert smart developers out there who just have no fucking.
And the funny thing is, I think they have .NET developers in the Dutch police force, because I've seen them buy dome train courses. We have actually a few police forces around there use .NET. So that's ridiculous that they wouldn't know. But yeah, there's still many people who think that. Like at this point, I've given up. I can't tell you how much I've tried. I've made so many videos, and to be honest, I get it. Like people who don't want their like you want to actively have your mind changed for your mind to change. You can't just be persuaded into that, because some people take a lot of like pride into being the anti-Microsoft guy or the anti-whatever guy. And the moment the company does something right, they don't want to admit it. So they just go, nah, fuck you. I'm not gonna worry about any of that. It is what it is for me, and I'm just gonna sleep like that.
Yeah. We've been talking about going to like a JavaScript conference, right?
Yeah.
And like a hostile territory. Because the other thing is we're in this huge echo chamber, and you probably get this too. Like if you're like, oh, why .NET is cool, no existing .NET developer gives a shit. They know .NET's cool.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's not super exciting. So we can't go to a JavaScript conference and be like, come use this cool .NET framework. Learn why .NET is actually so good. Because they're going to be like, I don't care. But if we go in there and we're like, hey, like your cloud app, one's without shenanigans now. And then .NET is an implementation detail that we skirt by. And maybe at the end, we're like, oh yeah, this uses .NET, works with all this stuff. You might actually get them to listen to you.
Yeah.
So, but it's scary. I'm like, I want to go to these .NET conferences where I know everybody now. To me, I don't want to go to a JavaScript conference. They're going to be mean.
Yeah.
Which is not true, but I'm like, oh my God, I don't know everybody.
It's a wild world. I think if you do it in a Java conference, you're gonna have a really bad time. I recently left. So there's this. Obviously, I'm Greek. I say obviously. For those of you who don't know, I'm Greek. And I was watching this Greek channel about like advice in the career for programmers. So like, will AI take good jobs, and they were talking about like tutorial hell and doing courses to learn. When I gave my input, obviously I have statistics on 55,000 students, and they said on the comment, "Oh, Nick, thank you for reaching out. Like, we've seen you. We hate .NET for reasons. And then I reached out and I'm like, why do you hate .NET? And it's like, well, it's not as cool as like JavaScript or Python or all of the other like Java. I'm like, Java is not cool. What?
No, dude.
Like,
No.
calm down. Java still can't do string interpolation in a decent way. Like, stop. They don't have like, I'm not gonna talk about features, but
Yeah.
there's so much elitism around that
Yeah.
it's the same thing as picking a team, like a football team, soccer team.
Yeah.
When you grow up and you have to spend the rest of your life defending it, it's the same thing that like you choose BMW, Mercedes, or Audi here, and you have to defend it until the end of time. It's the exact same thing. The only reason why you're biased is because you just happen to have this as the first thing you started. Like, I was a Java guy before .NET. I was convinced I'm gonna be building desktop applications with Java before I found the job. But then I was so desperate to find a job, I just said yes to everything that they offered me, and I got into .NET. And it's the best thing that happened to me, obviously. But at the time, I was that guy, and I wanted my mind changed. And you know how my mind was not changed by language features and performance and cross-platform ability or whatever. It was changed by people who sat down with me and explained to me why this makes sense for the business and why it's cool.
Yeah.
And ultimately, in order to do that, you need obviously good people talking about it, but also a good product.
Yeah. Yeah. You need the product truth. It's really weird. And I'm hoping that, there's also more to it, right? Like, there's marketing. There's that whole angle. Like, how do we actually talk about .NET? Where to go? There's a whole bunch of stuff. But, me as a product manager, I have control over the product. And so all I can do is try and make the product and position the product in a way that it's attractive to not .NET developers, which has been hard for me because I am now fully immersed in the .NET community. And I'm doing things that are like not what a .NET developer would probably care about. And it's weird. I have to justify that to myself and to other people. Like the whole CLI thing. Every time I've shown it to someone who's a .NET developer, they're like, why doesn't just .NET do it? And I'm like, no, .NET does do it. That's the point. Like, it's not as useful for a lot of people. And so I'm really trying to like not .NET myself, which is horrible because .NET's the best. But Java again, like we're not going to say Java developers. So we're trying to just sneak our way in other places.
Yeah.
Think of Java and .NET. I don't know if you've seen that meme. It's a golf meme. The one I think it's Tiger Woods or someone there in like the pants, the slacks and the button up and the whatever and the hat. Yeah. And then John Daly in the like crazy colored shirt is smoking the cigar and the crazy hair. I'm like, Java?
Yeah.
.NET.
Yeah.
We're fun.
My favorite one is there's this guy with like oversized khakis. It's like, if your boss wears these pants, you're not updating to .NET Core.
With the New Balance sneakers, it's like, oh no. So good.
I have a time machine, which it was a very weird thing to say, but I have a time machine. And it has two settings. It can take us 5 years into the future, but it's two separate timelines. The first timeline we're going to visit is 5 years in the future. Aspire has failed. Why did it fail?
So Aspire is the culmination of a lot of previous like failures or flameouts, like Thai, R9. There's a lot of things that failed to get to the Aspire point. And so if Aspire were to fail, I think I would lose my job. So it would be my fault. But also because it's because I came here now. I think it's because we couldn't figure out how to catch on to outside of .NET. I think Aspire, even if Aspire caught on to every single .NET developer, I don't think it would be because it's just another thing we have to maintain, but it's not actually improving the platform. It's improving developers' lives, but it's not improving the platform as a whole. And so if we can't figure out how to hook into people outside of .NET, Aspire is going to be a problem. And so I'm still like, as you could tell, I'm still figuring out how we're going to do this. We don't know. We're going to have to try a bunch of shit and so bad that we've shot ourselves in the foot. But I think that would be why. That or something comes out that standardizes a bunch of this shit and it's just completely misaligned with what we're doing. I don't think that's going to happen because so many people have tried and failed. That or like AI destroys the cloud or something.
Yeah.
But I would say if we can't break outside of, a regular ASP.NET dev, we have not done our job.
Because you have had developer already.
Yeah, exactly.
So Aspire is more of an acquisition strategy, or not. It's a developer tool, but
yeah,
it's refining something you could already do.
Yeah,
because it's like if you already were into cloud and distributed and services and everything, you already had a solution probably with Docker Compose, and then hooking up into Docker containers and so on. So you're simplifying that, which is great. But you will be focusing a lot on the story that says, if I have a Python application, I want to run it in Aspire. If I have a JavaScript application, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is we make our money from Azure, right? Like .NET's open source for free, and so if we're not growing the amount of people using the cloud, in general, but especially Azure, but AWS, lots of .NET on AWS is great too. We're not doing our job. And so originally, I think a lot of the Aspire stuff was for people who had on-prem monoliths, that kind of stuff, and they wanted to upgrade them to Azure and get them into the cloud, and that was a really good market. But that's a finite market. At some point, people will get their things on the cloud. And to hook people into our ecosystem in a way where like they use Aspire and they see that, AWS has done a ton of work. So I'm not trying to say that like Aspire doesn't work as well on AWS. It actually works very, very well. But if you want to stick with a first party thing, or we see when people use one of our services, they hook in. And so they're like, well, I'm using this .NET thing. .NET has a lot of really easy things. I'll just try in Azure for now, and then I'll switch to AWS later. But once you're hooked in, you're hooked in. And so expanding that base, because at a certain point, we're going to run out of on-prem .NET developers who are actually going to update their app. So that's a huge thing. And then, growing .NET in general.
Yeah. Do you see, because that gives me a better perspective on how you see things. Do you see a Python developer doing Aspire grow on a Python file or a Python project and then building an Aspire app host around that file or that project? Same with Node. So like Aspirify your existing other language thing.
Yeah. That's what I've been playing with. Like I have a project right now. It's a Python backend and JavaScript front end.
Yeah. And
I'm just going through different ways of Aspirifying it and how painful it is and if it's actually helpful. And so the actual Aspirification of it isn't bad. We have a lot of work to do on the integrations, like having to use a V for Python is on the whole thing. But getting it there and then being able to deploy it and stuff, that stuff's good. What the missing piece is right now for those is the like service default stuff. And so we're talking about how could we shove something on NPM maybe that wires up your JavaScript app to do the OTel and do all that magic. How do we make a Python module that would do all of that you just pip install Aspire defaults and it turns on all this shit for you? Would that be helpful? Do people actually want that? Do we have to do it as, in the post side? Like there's a lot of questions we're asking there. I think, in the short term, it's going to be JavaScript.NET or .NET with Python inference models or kind of these people who are already in .NET in some way. But we want in the long term to go outside of .NET entirely and start hooking in non-.NET things. I have a meme and it's like, it's the Trojan horse meme. And the horse is for a little Aspire hat and inside is just .NET. Yeah. And the door is like Python developers.
Yeah.
This is, it's a theory. Again, it might totally not work. But I think, like you said, once you get people using it and like seeing it and interested in their own way, and then that's going to be how we grow it, not by showing tech and power benchmarks. So
Yeah, I agree with that, the latter. Um,
yeah.
where do you think AI being integrated in Aspire?
I actually got called out in a meeting a couple weeks ago because I had not put AI on any slides. And they were like, where's the AI? I was like, the most bullshit answer I've ever given, but actually true. AI apps are the quintessential Aspire customer because they are so fucking difficult to build. Like the mod, blah, 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 blah. Like to me, an AI app is just a really obnoxious cloud. And so Aspire does just help with all of that. Yeah. Like it's just
Oh,
nice.
like I was processing, and I'm like, she has a point. Yeah.
And so Aspire helps with that off the bat. You know, like we don't have to do anything to make your life easier, but we probably should because that's the world. Um, there are a lot of things, and I'm less on the side of AI helping you be a developer, and more on the side of you having to develop AI. Because I've been the new Copilot agent thing and code is, but like I'm totally a skeptic. But I like tooling for when I have to develop AI stuff. And so the prompt explorer things that like Sanderson has showed in the past, how can we integrate that into Aspire? How can we make it so that when you have a model, you could add a model in your Aspire app host, and then that shows up as a resource. And what can we give you on that resource that's actually really useful information? Can you see the prompts? Can you see what the AI is responding to, what the weights are? Like, what can we do there that actually makes your life really easy? Um, and so those are the things we're looking at. Aspire AI, I was saying before we started, like I have a sticky note on my desktop that just says Aspire AI question mark because it's been this ongoing meme.
Yeah.
Like Aspire and AI has to be a thing. And I have to write it down at some point, but that's really what it is it's just making the existing guys float here.
I would die for Aspire integrated in some capacity in the dashboard where I'm running a performance test or some smoke tests against my system. And because it has visibility over logs and telemetry and all that, it can be like, oh, actually, that is a bit slow. Or like, actually, you have on the 99th percentile, that is not as fast as it was like that other time you run this thing. I think with so much data, a model integrated in Aspire that can look at your applications. Now it has the mind map as well that James is working on, and you can see connections.
Isn't that so fun? I love that thing.
You know what's hilarious? I was running my Aspire workspace that day, and in the morning as I was showing things, I said it would be insanely nice to have like a map that shows I can replay like an action. So I can say, show me on a map. I press like this API request and it says this, and you have a map that says how long it took on every request. 2 seconds later, James posts the mind map or the service map thing on Twitter, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's so James. It actually hurts.
It's crazy.
Yep. Yeah. There are a lot of opportunities there. And like Copilot in general as a platform is kind of reaching its fingers into more things. And so there's going to be a way at some point we want to do that. It's just when and what gets moved out to make that happen and yada, yada, yada. But yeah, the amount of knowledge Aspire has over your app is kind of like insane.
Yeah.
And it's weird that nothing else has that.
No. The only problem with that, which I've talked about how I don't like it, is please let me store it somewhere. I know you want the dashboard to be in memory and everything. I know. I've tried to download it. I tried integrating a database behind the scenes, but it's just everything is written so much for the in-memory functionality that it would just be so sick. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It is like constantly every release that we've planned so far, we're like, is this one we do persistence? Is this one we do persistence? And I'm not going to tell you because we have not actually decided for the next release. But yeah, it keeps coming up. And another thing that's been coming up now is like, if something's erroring out aggressively, it's going too fast and you can't pause it. And so how do you pause it, look at that thing, and then that probably needs persistence in a way under the hood so that things paused. But what do we build first? Blah, 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 blah. So yeah, that's on there. We are very everyone wants it locally. We would not the it's very unlikely we'd build that for the, or at least if we did, it would be very small.
Yeah.
Because have app insights or telemetry monitor or all of these like, or Grafana, these like tools for looking at the thing in the cloud.
Yeah.
We're looking at millions of requests per second instead of just the local version. But locally, we really want it. And then it's cool because you could, you're a co-pilot and say, hey, here's like 4 sessions. What's going on? And it would be able to tell you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm so I haven't really thought about this before, but I'm so doing a proof of concept where I just integrate clip into Aspire, and I put a explain. I'm gonna give it a ridiculous name like aspirator, but for AI, Aspire.
Aspirate. No.
Aspirate AI. No, everything has to be an agent nowadays, so it's going to be. I have to brainstorm it.
The Aspire to be
Captain Aspire.
Captain's. That's pretty good. Secret Agent Clippy.
Yeah, we'll actually call it Astra, which is the original name of Aspire.
True.
And then
there you go.
The logo is the Aspire triangle, but like duplicated twice to make a star.
The Triforce of Aspire.
Yes. It's the Triforce of Aspire.
Hold on, do you want some stickers? Because I have 2,500 of them.
I keep asking for them. David told me you're gonna give me a t-shirt, and you didn't have t-shirts.
We're not allowed to ask people for their mailing addresses. This is where we keep getting hung up.
Wait,
like what? Microsoft doesn't let us ask people. Like we have to do it under the hood. Like we're not supposed to do it formally, so we can't mail people unless it's like a user group, and they're like, mail it to my user group. Like mail it to my business. So we'll figure something out with you.
I'll give you my business
address. Yeah. Your business address. But it's so funny. Because we'll be like, oh yeah, we want to send people some stickers. And they're like, you can't ask, like, do you have their phone number? Would you send them a Christmas card? Then you can't ask them for that.
That's crazy. What?
Yeah. We actually care about people's privacy at Microsoft, which is nice.
It's fine. I can tell you where I live. I can tell you where I live. Like, right now I'm watching, my house number is. There's cuts. I actually had someone a few years ago that commented in one of my videos, and he said, Nick, I live on your street. Have a great day. And I'm like, you do not say those things. If you're watching, never say those things online. That is creepy. I will do bad things to you if you try anything.
Purely boxing.
Yeah.
Look, well, you were saying, like, I've been trying to get in touch with you. I'm like, never in my DMs, man. People are crazy. And people will be like, oh, you live outside of Boston? Like, what town? And I'm like, it's not hard to find out, first of all. Second of all, why are you asking? Why do you care? Why do you want to know?
Yeah, that's weird.
It's just a little creepy.
I think women in general have it worse, obviously, than men, right? But that can be very, very scary.
I do like outward hate on the internet.
Sorry?
Most hate people give towards me is like, Maui sucks and I hate you. Yours is like, you're so clickbaity.
Oh, no,
I'm like,
you changed. You sold out. I missed the old Nick. I'm like, well, sorry.
Yeah, you gotta make enough money to keep doing this.
Yeah, the old Nick is dead. and the next Nick, I'll tell you this thing: the next Nick is not making .NET videos. So,
like, you take that back. You take that back.
No, I'm not.
The next Nick is making AI videos, but with .NET.
Exactly. Yes, the next Nick is an agent, and it's actually me AI generated talking about .NET.
Nick.ai.
But he's still clickbaiting because he learned on my videos.
Right, that's a really good point, essentially.
Like, the title of this will be, she left Maui for Aspire, not clickbait, or something like that.
Clickbait, yeah. It's true, I did, but it's not why you think. It's because I also drank, I think, my local liquor store out of wine in the month between I decided leaving Aspire and leaving Maui and going to Aspire. Like my husband made me, I talked about it to him every day. Every night I was like, I can't leave Maui. I'm not gonna leave Maui. I can't leave, but Aspire, and this is a good opportunity and like career, and I'm, but then I'd have to learn. But then but what if it just flames out? But what if I don't know what I'm doing? But Maui is my love. I know the community, the bubble. I was like, I don't want to lose all my friends that I made.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, a lot of drinking in that month. But it was the right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm very, very jealous.
Yeah. You all should be. Everyone should be jealous. I have the best job.
Outside of .net, I know you do other stuff too, namely you sing. Do you want to plug anything here? Here's your chance. Because actually, I was thinking, I don't know if you've seen the other like, with David or whatever, but I will put something below you saying, what you do. And I think with David, it was like some dude at Microsoft in the beginning. And then when he said he was an intern, I said, former QA intern. Can I put Rockstar at your band name?
Yeah, please. We just are finishing mixing our first album spring or the summer. So Big Rav, BIGRAV. It does stand for Big Ravioli. It started as a joke. Unfortunately, the brand got too good. We now have hats with like little, and it's like a whole thing. It's out of control. But we have 2 songs on Spotify, and the rest will be coming out in a couple months. But yeah, I sing. My husband's the drummer.
Yeah.
Which is so funny. Terrible idea. We were together before we started the band, but like I understand why people say no romance in the band. And then our 2 best friends are the guitarist and the bassist. And so we actually have a show in 2 days that I have not prepared for. So we play all in the Boston area. We have a good time. It's a good excuse for us to go out.
I listened to the songs quite a few times. Actually, one has stuck in my mind. And it gives me that Paramore vibe that I've missed, like early days.
Thank you.
Like it's good.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we've got quite a bit of Paramore stuff, Paramore-esque influence.
Yeah.
I'm like Paramore and like Rush, and you threw them in a blender. Yeah. That's kind of where, like, because the boys love their funky little prog things, and I'm just like, I don't hungry and fun. So, yeah, cool.
Yeah, no, like I've never really talked about this, but I write a lot of music out of songs. I write a lot of lyrics, Greek and English, and like it's good. I really like lyrics that flow and like rhyming schemes and everything. It's like it's good. Yeah. Like congrats on your work.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a journey. It's hard. It's scary too. Like it's very weird. But it's fun. We should definitely talk about that though, because I have a lot of like mental breakdowns and recoveries about writing lyrics. I think last night I almost threw my phone at our bassist. So I'm getting so mad at him. I was like, I don't like. He's like, I was like, do like da 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 da, and he was like, no, it needs to be like da 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 da, and I was like, you're not listening to me. So that's my alter ego. That's my nighttime personality. But
so funny. Yeah, I've been at a band as a kid as well. Like I was playing the bass, later the guitar, because girls seem to prefer the guitar than the bass. I don't know why, but
it's true.
It is what
bassist is guy and the guitarist every show, and he's the one who's always had a girlfriend or guitarist, like always. And after every show, the girl, oh my god, Dan, you're so. And his current girlfriend is so funny. She just stands there and she's like, he's my boyfriend. I'll let the person. Like, you guys are so funny. But yeah.
Well,
there's a lot of music people in .net. Yeah. Like, you start passing around, it's crazy.
There's a lot of music people in programming, I think, in general. Like,
we're all mental and we all need the outlet.
Yeah. No, well, I think it's also I don't know how to explain it, but playing an instrument or like writing lyrics for me is just like code that flows very nicely. It's like you're trying to find the right next thing to say, and sometimes you have the end of the code, but you don't have how you end here. Like you know what you want to return, but you don't know how to get it. It's like writing lyrics for me is the same.
I
So
like that.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty good. Wow. Inspiring. It's inspirational. I
well,
aspire
you aspire.
to Drake.
I aspire that Maui song will be no. Sorry, no.
No, I have not. I don't think I've written any songs about. I mean, I've written about work in the way that it affects my like mental
Yeah,
life, but I have not actually written anything like Maui. Thank God.
yeah.
So that's fun.
Xamarin can sound like a band, like a metal band name.
Xamarin sounds like an anti-anxiety medication.
That's true.
Like Xamarin to me, I started as like it's like, oh, you want your like Xamarin or Xanax?
Some Xanax.
Oh, like okay, yeah, that sounds. Oh, I'm gonna go take my Prozac, but I added some Xamarin to the fridge. Oh my God.
Oh, that's the best episode. Okay, and on that note, thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you for having me. This was fun.
And thank you all for listening. And as always, keep playing music and keep coding. Bye.